I am here a couple minutes late. I ran late with the earlier class because I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning when nobody, not even the birds, were up. And so I want to change the time. So we're going to start this whole thing at 8 and not 7. I don't have to be ridiculous about my volunteering to do this. And so this class, the Bookless classroom, will now start at 9 o'clock. Okay? All right. So and because I was like running around at 6 o'clock in the morning, still with sleep in my eyes, I still have a few things to get organized. Like my coffee is over there and it's smelling delicious, and I want my coffee. So, but you know what? We're gonna go ahead and get started with this day anyway. And I'll grab my coffee when we take a break. That was our ABCs. I love that video. Thank you, Greg and Steve, for the song for the ABC video that I'm doing. And I made that video. So, and I've already got more views than any other video I've made on it. It's been out there for 2 days. So check out my alphabet video. So ABC rock song with the song, using the song by Greg and Steve. It's a cute little song. Okay, so here's another song that I've been playing because in our last lesson, we learned about friendship because it is for younger kids, right? Our earlier lesson is for younger kids. And so let me check out my volume here because I think it was really low this morning. I know it was. So I'm moving it up. And it was, check out that song by Tyler Braden. It's a really, really good song. And it's a song about brotherhood. And it's a song about friendship. And the friendship is between men. And it's important, I think, for men to have good, strong friendships with one another. Because what they do is, what we know friendships do for one another is they are a way that we can kind of check ourselves. I'm talking about in our spiritual classroom, I'm talking about the Holy Trinity and about how you need to find what we were calling a triune, what I'm calling a triune. The other two people in your life that make you whole, that make you complete. And because generally speaking and naturally speaking, we are, not that we're criticizing anything else, but we need to know the truth. The truth is, naturally speaking, we are divided into men and women, boys and girls. So if we find our triune, and it doesn't have to be that way. I'm trying to make a point to you, all right? I just want to make a point. And that is that if we have our triune, we will have three people. We will have two of them being the same gender, right? And yet we have this wonderful, perfect group, with two of them being what we would consider today to be the same gender, or in regular terms, right? Terminology. We would say that two of those would be the same gender. Well, when we are creating this relationship, that is a perfect relationship. A perfect relationship is based on perfect love. My willingness to give myself to you. And we know that there is no greater gift that somebody can give to a friend than to offer their life for a friend, right? Now, nobody's asking you to do that, please. Nobody's saying that that's what you need to do to prove your friendship. But if circumstances come up, we know firemen, there is no greater gift that a fireman could give another fireman than to give his life for somebody like me or for their fellow firemen, right? So what we know is that we likely have to come to a better understanding of what it means to love people of the opposite sex and to love people of the same sex. We have to have an understanding of what that means. And we are in what's considered a middle school classroom. And we are discovering who we are. It's not a crapshoot. What I mean by that is I just don't throw the dice and decide who I am. Much of that decision is already made in my DNA. What's my job is to discover ways that I can remain true to whatever that perfect self of me is. Whatever, when I put every perfect talent that I have, It doesn't mean I'm perfect at everything. When I put together every perfect talent that I have, what's a perfect talent in my mind? A perfect talent would be that my score on all of my talents. So if I am, at a 7 on washing dishes, hopefully I'm better than that. Let's say an 8 on washing dishes, but I am a 5 on drawing, right? But I am a 7 on stained glass, right? So that's my perfect score for me. That would be my perfect score. If when I did stained glass, that I did it at a level of 7, it doesn't mean I can't sometimes do it at 8. But me being perfect doesn't mean that I'm perfect. It just means that I can do things to the best of my ability. And so when we are looking at what I'm calling a triune, two other people that are just, that you are so connected to, two other people. And maybe you don't know those people right now, but throughout life, you will begin to find these. I bet you know one of those, though. I bet you know one. And maybe we know both of them early on, but maybe we don't know we know the other one, right? But I bet you know one of those in your triune. The number 3 is it stands for perfection. The number 3 stands for perfection. So I think when we find the people we are supposed to be in this perfect triangle group, what we find is that the other people help check us. They help check our thinking, right? And even if all of these people in our little threesome group are weird, maybe by every other standard, we're weird, but I found my group, right? That's what that is about. But I still found my group anyway, because when we get together, this group, whoever it is, when we get together, we can move towards perfection. It's not that we're perfect, but somehow the combination of the 3 of us helps us move towards perfection. I want you to think about that. Even if you're in middle school joining me, I want you to think about that, because we can't do it alone. Even though we've been pushed into isolation, we can't do it alone. And we will keep making mistakes until we have help, until we have friends, until we have a brotherhood, until we have a sisterhood, right? Okay, all right. So let's talk about what we're supposed to talk about in our Bookless classroom today. So this is the alphabet that we're doing for the earlier class, so you guys get the advantage. And we even have worksheets. So this kind of shows you, if you came to the middle school class but you want to learn a little bit more about we're reading a story in there, which is good stories about friendship and things that we learn in younger classes. But look at what else I have. I have worksheets there for you as well. So maybe you need some practice, and maybe you don't want to come to class, but you need some practice on your short vowel sounds. So nobody will know if you watch the video or if you download those worksheets. And I've got to get those worksheets up there and running for us. Okay, so here we are. And if you recall what we're trying to do, because this really is the major task of middle school age children. The major task of middle school children is, drum roll please, to find out who you are. That really is. And if you remember from day 1, what we talked about was the importance of that finding out who you are is that we call that being true to ourselves, okay? That we have certain talents, just like I said, that make us perfect. And those set of talents, which are infinite, right? That score that we would have is unique to us. So what are we supposed to be doing there during this time of middle school? Finding out what are those talents. That's exactly what this time is for. You are meeting new people. You are finding your peer group. You are finding out who you fit in with and who you don't. You're finding out who is good for you and who is bad for you. These are all the things that we are figuring out, okay? And all of those things, because we're meeting new people and going to school and learning new things, it will be natural for us to find out, are we good at sports or not? Are we good at art or not? Are we good at making friends or not? Are we good at music or not? Are we good at learning or not? We have to learn, but some of us learn differently than what we have in the classroom. These are all things that we find out how through our social relationships. We find out who we are by doing a comparison, right? I have these skills, but I don't have these other skills. How do I find that out? Because when we start going to school, we think we are the bomb usually. A lot of times, hopefully, your family life is that way, where you have people who are telling you how great you are and that someday you could become president and you can do anything that you want, right? And hopefully you have an environment like this. But when you go to school, you find out that's not true. You find out some of those things aren't true, that you are not the greatest at everything. Despite the fact that your entire family applauded everything that you do, you go to school and you find out your position. You begin to find out your position. Now, it doesn't mean you have to stay in that position. We're not putting you in a position, but a position can mean I have a position on a sports team because I have a position in life where I am athletic. That's what we're talking about. So we're talking about what is your job during this time. Your job is to find out who you are. Why? So you're not running around questioning it when you're a full-blown adult. That's the reason why. You're not running around going, who am I, when you're 35 years old. That's why you find out who you are when you're younger. Now, one of the problems is that we might not like who we are, or other people might not like who we are. And so that's the problem. We come blazing in kindergarten going, look, and I'm here. And everyone's like, yeah, I'm bored with you already. Look, I'm here, right? Worry about me. So it is not an easy task. We are doing all of this comparing and contrasting and finding out we might not be as great as we think that we are. And then we're told, oh, that's supposed to depress us. And now I'm anxious and depressed because I don't even know who I am. Well, again, we don't need 35-year-olds running around going, who am I? They should be working, right? And they should be producing, which is what we talked about yesterday, right? They should be producing is what they should be. They should be producers, not worrying about who they are. And so, not that we don't change. Of course we change. You know, you hopefully aren't the same skateboarder at 12, at 35 that you were at 12, right? But some people are. I've seen them. All right. We just want to aspire to greater goals. That's all I'm saying. We just want bigger goals. That's all I'm saying. Okay. We're going to talk a lot about who we are. I just had another idea about what we're going to talk about. It's called the Bis Bass. We're going to do the Bis Bass with you guys, okay? So look forward to the Bis Bass. And remember that if you don't see something that you want, I told you about some of those worksheets there, and you don't see the worksheets, you're like, hey, Dr. Feravich, you said Bis Bass, and I'm not seeing any Bis Bass. Oop. I switched over to something else to show you. Oh, there we go. Hold on. So if you have something that you are curious about, and don't see. I promised you I would talk about the Bis Bass. I promised you that you could have the worksheets, and you haven't seen the worksheets. You can email me there at Dr. F as in Frank, ERA, V as in Victor, ICH, at healthymindbodyspirit.net. All right, so I'll let it run one more time there so that you can get it. Dr. Feravich at healthymindbodyspirit.net. Don't be afraid to email me if you're looking for some information about the things that we've been talking about, or more specifically, like I said, about some worksheets. We had the Who Moved My Cheese word search, right? So take a look at that. You should have that available as well. All right, let's stop the ticker. Let's go back to where we were. Oh, magic. Okay, yeah, technology, whatever. Okay, so our jobs and what I'm helping you do, and lots of different ways to think about lots of different things. I'm helping you find out who you are. And also, in doing so, we're talking about history as well. I got some more cool information. I've been looking up Aztecs. I've been looking up Cortez. I've been looking up Columbus. Those are things that you can do, as well as some of these things that we've been talking about finding out who am I? So maybe what you do is, I don't like this all of a sudden. That's what I have to do. I have to sit back. Don't you hate when I do that? I do. I hate when I try and figure these things out. You're like, where'd she go? What's she doing now? I get it. I'm moving my chair. I'm getting situated. There we go. So I'm going to help you do that. And in between, we are going to be doing right now some history lessons. Again, I think I told you history is not wasn't my favorite subject. Not that I didn't find it interesting. I do find a lot of things about history interesting. I just don't happen to find the way that they teach it interesting. There's all kinds of things that jump out at you in history. I don't think the way they teach it is interesting at all, right? Maybe that's why my son likes history, because he never paid attention in class, so he learned history in his own way. Maybe that's the reason why. Okay, so who am I? Now, if you recall, we were talking about different cultures and the way that different cultures also see who they are. Now, I've got a slide here, and I don't want to go through all my slides. That's at the end of this, which is a slide that we had on day 2, I believe it is, where we got the rose-colored glasses. That's what we want to remember. We want to remember that as I'm developing who I am, that there are all kinds of, and I like to call them presses because I think that's a great word. And if we can handle the presses of society, we can handle more stress. So think of them as presses on you. And in fact, that's a word that's used for these kinds of changes in the environment. They press upon you, and what they press then upon you is change, is to then make some changes in your life, right? So Western individuals, which would be considered people like the United States, Canada, and really we're talking about what we would call advanced countries, first world countries is what we would call them. I don't think we use that term anymore, but we change our verbiage all the time so that nobody knows what anybody's talking about. It's like mixing up your language at the Tower of Babel, isn't it? That's exactly what they're doing. Look up the Tower of Babel, what they did. That's what they're doing. They're mixing up our languages just like the Tower of Babel. Oh my gosh, I have your number. In the Bookless classroom, we got a number. So these cultures then put pressures on us to act like the culture, right? We've seen lots of behaviors that are very disparate. They are very far apart. They are I'm thinking of other words like disparate, because I gave you a big word, disparate, right? It's kind of it's from desperation, but what that does is it divides us as well, okay? And feelings of like despair, all right? So we got this word that's got a lot of complex meanings, but what it does is it puts us at odds with one another, all right? It makes us distant from one another. And that's what's going on. A lot of times with the isolation, what's going on, and with strong opinions about different things, we become divided from one another. And then there is distance between us, between our ideas, and even between our physical bodies. And what that does is it does leave us in places of feeling anxious and sometimes sad and depressed. Why? Because we are not going through the normal steps of being a youngster, of being young, of finding out who people are so I can find out who I am. Am I smart? Am I average? Right? And we always see our world through those rose-colored glasses. And that's a wonderful thing. It motivates us, it spurs us on. We want to see the world in this very positive way. We like that about ourselves. It is a mechanism for survival, is what it is, right? But not just surviving, actually thriving, creating, right? Learning. All of these things are what the body and the mind and the spirit eat up. They're all the things that our body and the mind and the spirit eat up. Curiosity, information, learning, working for a goal, working to solve a problem. All of those things are part of who we are and learning about who we are. We're not born with that knowledge. Some knowledge we are born with, right? But we're not born with the knowledge of knowing exactly who we are. We have a part of ourselves, don't we, that nobody else knows, don't we? We have a part of ourselves that thinks thoughts that nobody else knows, right? And somebody could be talking all about something like me right now, right? And you could be someplace else, and I might never know. Even if I were looking you in the eye, I might never know. We call that the self. Why? Because we know that there's an entity in us that nobody else knows about. What do we call that? What is that? What is that when I'm thinking about something? What is that when I'm figuring things out in my own way with my own personality? What is that? We call that the self. And in psychology, it sounds weird, right? You might say, well, isn't that myself? What's the word, the self? Why are you calling it the self? That's just kind of a scientific term to divide us from other people, and also to make sure that we have an understanding then that this entity is something to be studied and understood, the self, right? There are common things about myself just that are in you too. So I have my unique talents, right, that make me me, finding out my true self, what they are. But every human being has certain things about the self. We all hide things, right? We all hide things at some time. We all hide things. We're not all just blah, blabbermouths, right, about who I am. So we all hide things. So that's a common thing about the self, right? There are a lot of common things. We all want justice. We all seek justice. We all experience the same emotions, not to the same degree, right? And some people to almost no degree at all, right? Things like shame or embarrassment, right? There are some cultures that are that don't have as many words for that emotion, which suggests that they don't experience that emotion as much. When we experience an emotion, a lot. We have lots of words for it, right? Uh, now we are experiencing all kinds of negative emotions, and we have a whole host of vocabulary now for that. When we get a vocabulary more and more and more for something, what that does is it sheds light on that concept, is what it does. I'm using props now, visuals. I always have visuals. Now I'm using props, is what I'm doing. It sheds light on our understanding of that concept and that word. And right now, what we want to do is we want to shed light on how you discover who you are. That's what we're doing in this bookless classroom. So that's the reason why we really don't need any books. As you know, I bring stories here like Who Moved My Cheese and books, and I'll bring things like that here, things that I've read. You need to bring a piece of paper. I gave an idea. I don't think it was in this class. I was in another class, but if you want to write something down, somebody in our story, it was in the Reptile Room, which I have that book upstairs. For the Reptile Room, our story at the end of the day, the person in the story had put pieces of paper all over the girl's room, so whenever she had an idea, she could pull a piece of paper down, write her idea, and then stick it back up there, and her ideas would be in front of her face, right? Well, if you were to string a line, some kind of line across your room, you can do more than one. You could use a clothesline pin, right? One of those clipper pins that are on the clothesline. Do you even know what a clothesline is? Oh my goodness gracious. We used to hang our clothes out, and that's how we used to dry them, right? Hang them out in the wind, and that's how we used to dry our clothes. Uh, yeah, and it made them, they smelled really good, but they were just hard as rocks. I hated it. It's like, oh, don't you love the way that clothesline sheets smell? Yeah, but they're hard as rocks, so we kind of like making them soft. Anyway, so you string this clothesline and you use these clothespins, right, the clip ones, and you can clip pieces of paper to it. And then in clipping those pieces of paper, you can pull them down, right, and clip them right back up. Write your idea, pull them down, write your idea, clip them right back up there. So something for the booklet, and then you come to class, whoop, take down a piece of paper. You have a piece of paper to write when you come to class, right? So they're right there hanging on your clothesline. Blank piece of paper, but also ideas all around your head. And imagine if you had your ideas right around your face, right? But changing ideas, dynamic ideas, moving ideas, how you would figure out who you are much easier, wouldn't you? I would think that you would figure out who you are easier because your goals and your ideas, your inventions, whatever they are on pieces of paper in front of your face anytime you walk into your bedroom, right? What a great idea to find out who you are. All right. Now, we are also finding out who we are in exploring a new world. And I want to keep you interested in this idea because what it does is it tells you something about you. Now, I don't know. Maybe you know. You probably know more than I do. I don't know what I would do if I were exploring a new world. It's a very hard question for me to answer, right? But maybe you've already thought about it. A lot of young minds have explored new things, and with our movies that are all parts of fantasy, right? This Mission Impossible, all part of fantasy. Maybe you have fantasized about what you would do if you found a new world. Well, we have experience with this, right? We know what Christopher Columbus did. We know what Cortez did. Both of them were explorers from Spain. And the interesting thing then about this is that so Spain was run by a monarchy. So a monarchy is a single person, a single ruler. Mono means one, okay? right? Uno means one. I think mono also means one, doesn't it? Better look that up for sure. And I'm going to look that up right now. So one ruler, a king, and a monarchy, I believe, also means that they would be run by the leaders would be a form of government with a monarch at head. All right, really, seriously, didn't anyone ever tell you not to use the word to define the word? It's a head of state for life. So it looks like, though, it doesn't have to be a king and a queen, but it sounds like it often is. Okay, so I was just looking that up. Just exactly what you should be doing if you don't understand. So, it just said something about a king and queen. Monarchs can carry various titles such as emperor, empress, king, and queen. Monarchies can form federations, personal unions, realms with vassals through personal associations with the monarch. And that's what we see that these monarchies did. So made basically promises or covenants or trade agreements in our language today with other nations. So the head of a nation, the head of a state, right? Stay with Spain. So I think it was Fernando. I think it was Fernando the second, was the king of Spain, along with Queen Isabella. Now they were king and queen of two different areas, but because Isabella was the queen of Castile, Ferdinand became the king of Castile as well. Castile and Ferdinand was the king of another area, which is Aragon, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. All of these areas are Spain, what we know to be Spain today. Now you can see how the language can get us very confused and not allow us to really understand what's going on. When you read that she's the queen, Isabel is the queen of Castile, you're like, I don't even know where that is. I don't even know what that is. And unless you look it up, you wouldn't realize, yes, you do know where it is. It's Spain, right? So we have these ancient names for areas that we live in right now, right? Persia, ancient name for Iran, all right? So we have these ancient names for places that we live right now. So again, this kind of language barrier that we have to understanding even history, even though it's very easy to understand. We had a king and queen of Spain. That's it. And they ruled things. And what they did was they went to other countries, took their land, and became king and queen of that, right? So it says that they could make deals if there was a king and queen in another land. It wasn't easy, was it? It wouldn't be easy to say, hey, I'm king and queen of this land. But if I found a new world, couldn't I say I'm king or queen of this land? Couldn't I claim that land in the name of the king and queen? Because guess who's not sailing to the new world? The king and queen, right? They're not sailing to the new world. Who sailed to the new world? Columbus did, Cortez did, both around the same times, both coming into the Americas that are new worlds to them, but what? But inhabited. But they had people there. So, what was the very first thing that Columbus did? I'm trying to think if I read it in the Columbus or if I read about Cortez. I read about Columbus. The very first thing that he did He got off his boat with the natives looking at him, right? The natives of that land, those who inhabited that land, they were the natives of that land, okay? With the natives of that land looking at him, wondering what he's saying and talking about as he steps off his ship and declares that the land is now owned by Spain. How about that? And by the way, no different than us describing Latinos and Latinas as Latin Xers. I don't even know. Latinx. I don't even think I pronounced that right. Why would we be giving another culture a name? But we did. Those natives had a name. It was a big long name, and I didn't, and it was hard for me to pronounce. And there were many, different natives from different areas with big long names that was hard for me to pronounce. But they had names, and Columbus called them Indians, is what he did. Indios. The Spanish name for El Indios is what he called them, the Indians. And guess how they got their name? Not because that's what they called themselves. They called themselves something different. What would you do if you discovered a new world? Would you get off your boat or your spaceship? Would you get off your ship and would you declare the land is owned by you? And what if there were inhabitants already in this new world? It's not a new world. It's a new world to you. It wasn't a new world to the people who lived there. That was the old world to them, right? They had known that world for centuries. Would you come off and would you call them? Would you give them a name so that you could understand them, so that you could communicate with them? Is that what you would do? What would you do? Would you learn their language? Would you learn their customs? Because historically, that's not what we did. Historically, what we did was we came in and we tried to change their customs. We came in with the assumption that our customs are better than your customs. That was the assumption that we came into the new world with. And we came into the new world with, let me teach you something. I want to teach you something. And so we came into the new world with all kinds of information. Isn't that what we want to do? Isn't that usually what we want to do? We meet somebody new and we're like, let me tell you about what I do, right? We want to tell you about our great thoughts, what we learned, right? We want to tell you about how we make music or the picture we drew if we're an artist or a storyteller or whatever. That's what we want to do. I want to tell you about who I am. Our greatest drive is to know and to be known. That is relatedness. Our greatest drive is for one another. Our greatest drive is to know and to be known. But isn't that interesting, right? Because we wanted to know about what was going on, but only to then impose our great ideas, right? But this isn't something that's exclusive to the United States. Obviously, it's not. Spain was doing it. Spain was doing it, right? And we had kings and queens from England who were doing very similar things to other countries, right? So, this is interesting because there's a lot to learn about it. This seems to be a very human thing to do. Maybe it's not always nice, but these individuals probably didn't think that what they were doing wasn't nice. They probably thought that they were doing these natives a favor. Let me tell you about what we have. We have kings and queens, and we live this fancy life that's not like your life over here where you're running around half naked. We have a fancy life. We have a fancy life where we drape ourselves in beautiful linens, Columbus said that the woman wore copper on their body. Now, making copper almost warrior-like outfits sounds very beautiful to me. Could you imagine wearing copper breastplates, right? As a man or a woman, I would think that that would make you look very beautiful. But when something is unfamiliar to us, the very first thing that we feel is not usually friendship. Let me get to know you. It usually is fear. And then we impose who we are. How about you get to know me so you don't kill me, right? How about you get to know me? And then in that way, what we end up doing is we end up kind of, here's the natives, and we end up infiltrating all of their customs, right? All of their land, all of their resources, right? So now all of a sudden, where they had the natives, we are in every nook and cranny of what they have and what they own. And often it seems like they wanted to share as much as we wanted to share, that they were willing to understand and learn. But there's something else going on there, right? There's something else going on there that really prevents us from understanding and knowing a brand new culture when we go to explore a new world. So we want to know about what we've done in exploration, in our exploring in the past. So if and when we discover a new world, right, that we don't act like the barbarians that we've acted like. And that's so interesting to me, that we think that somehow we have evolved to act better. And somebody said, well, we couldn't have that today. And yet we have, I hate to bring it up, but an act of violence, so much so that this year at the Academy Awards, they had to have all kinds of extra security there. So when somebody says that wouldn't happen today, well, apparently it does exactly happen today, right? Exactly happen today, all of this violence. So we do see things through rose-colored glasses, and that's the way that we're supposed to see things as we discover ourselves, as we learn about ourselves. We are supposed to do that. However, we also have to have a perspective, in particular, I would say, on history, that removes us from the crime, right? I didn't do that to those Indians. Somebody else did that to those Indians, right? And I didn't name them Indian. And if I would have gone there, I would have asked them what their name was. And then I would have called them that great big, likely not. So we have, but we are also individuals if they weren't like me. Why? Because we thought they were savages, is what we thought that they were. Were they savages? Sometimes the Aztecs really did sacrifice people, and they really were cannibals. They really were. There's evidence, there's very much mounting evidence of them being cannibals and sacrificing individuals. That's abhorrent behavior. And as I said yesterday, but there was a reason. They believed that they would die if they did not sacrifice human beings to the sun god. Now, I don't think I got to that with you guys in this Bookless classroom. I talked about it in another classroom because some of these things happen to overlap, probably because I'm thinking about them, right? So let's get down to Christopher Columbus, and we're going to get some of this background on cannibalism, okay?